Okay, so have you heard about this family in Colorado that's getting all this heat for their Christmas lights?
Oh, yeah, I saw that on TikTok.
It's gone totally viral.
Wild.
And it's actually more complicated than you might think, you know?
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, the neighbors hate their inflatable Santa or something.
Right.
There's a lot more to it.
It gets pretty interesting because it kind of goes beyond just like, you know, those typical neighborly disputes that you hear about, you know, over holiday decorations. You start to see like, oh, wow, there could be some like legal issues here and harassment claims, and even the landlord might be a part of the problem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
So we've been combing through like all these news articles and social media posts about it. And yeah, let me tell you, it's a wild ride.
Buckle up.
So in this deep dive, we're going to try to like unpack all of it, lay out all the facts, see where the law stands, and maybe even, you know, understand some of the bigger questions that this whole thing brings up.
I think it's fascinating.
What do you think is like the most surprising thing so far?
I think for me, it's how, you know, it seems like such a simple thing, right? Christmas lights.
Yeah.
But it kind of reveals a lot about like how communities work or don't work.
Yeah.
And how conflicts can really blow up, especially now with everything online, you know?
See.
But let's rewind for a sec. So we're in Castle Rock, Colorado, right? This family, they've gone all out decorating their house for Christmas lights, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But some of their neighbors and even their landlord are saying it's too much. They're calling it a nuisance.
And they haven't just been complaining quietly. Right. Like they've actually called the police about it, haven't they?
Oh, yeah, multiple times. They've called the police on this family 7 times. And that's actually out of 17 complaints they've made against this family just since November.
Wow. So they're not messing around.
No, they are not.
I mean, with that much attention, you'd think they were like seriously breaking some rules, wouldn't you?
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. They're not.
Really? So what's going on?
It turns out Castle Rock has this specific law about holiday lights. And it basically says that you can have more leeway when it comes to lights during the holidays.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's usually from November to like mid-January, something like that.
Right.
And during that time, it's like a temporary exemption from the normal rules about too much light or, you know, whatever.
So there's like a special rule just for holiday lights.
Exactly.
Okay. But that hasn't stopped the harassment, has it?
Unfortunately, no.
I mean, what's the point of a law if people can just ignore it and still target you like this?
Right, and that's where it starts to get really troubling, I think.
Yeah.
They're facing all these attacks online, people are making accusations, there might even be some false claims being spread around, you know? Wow.
It's gone way beyond just a simple disagreement about decorations.
And we should be clear, this isn't just like anonymous internet trolls, right?
No, it's not.
The family is saying that their landlord is actually involved.
That's what they're saying.
Like maybe even retaliating against them for putting up the lights.
Exactly. Which, if that's true, that adds like a whole other layer to this, you know?
Totally.
Makes you think about like the power dynamics between landlords and tenants and how that plays into everything.
Right.
So the family, they've hired a lawyer.
Okay.
Not just to try to deal with the harassment, but also to sort out these landlord issues.
So it could get even more complicated.
Oh, it could.
Wow.
They're even thinking about a defamation lawsuit.
A defamation suit, huh?
Yeah, it's getting serious. What do you think about that?
It's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? On the one hand, you have this, you know, town law that's specifically there to protect holiday decorations.
But then on the other hand, you have this family feeling totally bullied and now maybe facing legal battles on multiple fronts.
It shows you the tension that can exist between like individual rights and what a community expects, you know?
Yeah.
They're allowed to have these lights up legally, but that doesn't mean they're immune to how other people react.
It's like their rights are clashing with people's perception.
Exactly.
And it's causing all this friction. It really makes you wonder, like, what exactly is considered harassment in a situation like this?
That's the question, isn't it?
Especially because, like, based on the law, these complaints seem kind of unfounded.
Well, there's this guy, Michael Carter. He's a tenant rights advocate, and he actually weighed in on the case. He said, and I'm quoting here, "Repeated police calls without a single citation speak volumes. It's clear this is harassment, plain and simple."
So even though they haven't broken any rules,
yeah,
like technically,
right,
just the sheer number of complaints and the police being called, that suggests something's off.
Yeah, it suggests a pattern of behavior that could be considered harassment.
I see what you mean.
Like, The fact that they haven't gotten any citations, that makes it seem like maybe these complaints aren't actually about the lights themselves, you know?
Right.
Like maybe there's something else going on.
And of course, this whole thing is blown up on social media, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
The family's actually been documenting everything that's been happening to them. They're on TikTok. I think they're at the Angry Neighbors. It's really resonated with a lot of people.
Social media, it can be a great tool for bringing attention to things and finding support.
Right.
But it can also make things worse.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy for misinformation to spread and for things to escalate online.
And we're definitely seeing both sides of that here, right?
Yeah.
The family's gotten tons of support from people online, but they're also dealing with trolls and nasty comments and even some people spreading rumors about them.
It's really a stark reminder that what happens online can have a very real impact in the real world.
Absolutely.
And it kind of makes you think about, like, the responsibility we all have when we're online, you know? We have to be careful about what we believe and what we share.
Okay, so just to recap, we've got this really weird mix of things going on, right? Holiday decorations, people getting way too upset about them, a law that's supposed to protect the family but isn't really working.
Yeah.
And then social media just amplifying everything.
It's quite a combination.
So where do you think this leaves us? Like, what are your initial thoughts about all of this?
I think it really boils down to this question. Can you truly enjoy a right that you have if using that right makes you a target?
Mixed deep.
You know, the city of Castle Rock and the police department, they haven't really said anything about all of this, even with all the attention it's getting. So I'm really curious to see how they'll respond, if at all. What do you think about that?
I'm right there with you. I'm so curious to see what they'll do. You know, if anything, will this lead to them changing how they deal with stuff like this in the future? What about other families that might be going through something similar?
Those are some really good questions.
You know, families who might be facing harassment, even though they're not actually doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
It's really something to think about.
Definitely. And those are actually some of the things we're going to be digging into more as we continue this deep dive.
Okay, so this is just the beginning. There's a lot more to uncover here.
Oh, yeah, we're just getting started.
So we've got this family. They can have their Christmas lights up legally, but they're still dealing with all this negativity. It almost feels like we're watching the law and real life, like, clash. So what happens next?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? We've seen how this conflict has gotten out of hand, but where does it go from here? This case, it could actually set a precedent for how other towns handle similar disputes, you know, in the future.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it kind of shines a light on how communities react to complaints, especially when those complaints might not even be about an actual violation of the rules.
So you're saying this isn't just about Christmas lights in Colorado. Like, this could have implications for other places, other types of disagreements?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. What if, like, someone paints their house a really bright color and their neighbors hate it? Or what if someone starts a home business that causes more traffic on their street? It's the same idea, right? Where's the line between you doing something you're allowed to do and other people getting upset about it?
I see what you mean. It's about finding the balance between individual freedom and keeping the peace in a community. But in this case, if what the family is saying is true, it seems like the neighbors and maybe even the landlord are using complaints as a way to target them, not because the lights are really a problem.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part. How do we tell the difference between valid concerns and situations where people are weaponizing complaints, you know, just to cause trouble? It's hard because you have to figure out someone's intent, and that can be really tough to prove. But the way things have played out in this case, with all the complaints and the police visits but no citations, it makes you think maybe there's more to the story.
And then you throw social media into the mix. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Right.
Things can escalate so fast online, and we've seen how that can be both good and bad in this story.
It's a double-edged sword, that's for sure. The family's gotten a lot of support online, which is great, but they've also had to deal with awful comments and accusations that aren't even true. It just goes to show you online platforms can be used for good or for bad.
So then we're back to this question of how to protect free speech, but also protect people from harassment. How do we even do that? How do we make the internet a place where people can express themselves without being attacked or bullied?
Well, that's something that a lot of really smart people are trying to figure out right now, you know, experts in tech and law and all that. There's no easy answer. It'll probably involve things like making the platforms themselves take more responsibility, coming up with better tools to moderate content, and maybe even teaching people how to be better digital citizens, you know, how to be responsible online.
And I think it's important to remember that there's a real person on the other side of every screen.
Yeah.
This family has talked about how stressed out they are, how targeted they feel, how they can't even enjoy the holidays because of all this. It just shows you online actions have real-world consequences.
Absolutely. And their experience really highlights how important empathy is, both online and offline. It's easy to get caught up in the moment and forget that what we say can have a real impact on other people. Sometimes a little kindness can go a long way.
This whole situation, it's kind of like it's revealing all these cracks in our communities, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We're seeing problems with landlords and tenants, problems with social media, problems with how law enforcement handles these kinds of disagreements. What do you think this says about the bigger picture?
I think you're right on the money with that. This case, it goes way beyond just Christmas lights. It's showing us these deeper issues in society, things like fairness, how we get along as a community, and how we deal with disagreements in a world where everyone seems to be on opposite sides of everything. Makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. It almost seems like the holidays, a time that's supposed to be about peace and being together, it's actually making the tensions that are already there even worse.
Huh. That's an interesting thought. Maybe the pressure to be happy and celebrate, maybe it backfires sometimes, and it brings out the conflicts that are already simmering under the surface.
But this family, they've been really strong through all of this. They haven't let people silence them. They keep speaking out about what they're going through. And I think their story is resonating with people all over because it's about fairness, about standing up for what you believe in, things like that.
They've kind of become accidental representatives for something much bigger than themselves. They're making people think about how communities work, how we resolve conflicts, how important it is for individuals to speak up. It's pretty powerful, I think.
It really is. It's like their Christmas lights. They're not just about holiday cheer anymore. They're about the right to express yourself without being afraid of what'll happen.
They've started this national conversation, even though they probably didn't mean to. But there's still more to talk about. This deep dive isn't over yet. What are your thoughts as we get into the last part of this?
Well, we've talked about the problems and how complicated all of this is, but I'd really like to hear what you think we can learn from this. Like, what can we do differently as individuals and as communities? How can we move forward in a way that's more about understanding, respect, and getting along?
Those are excellent questions, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in the final part of this episode. We'll be diving into some practical steps we can all take and some strategies for dealing with conflict in a way that's more constructive and empathetic.
Okay, so as we head into the last part of this deep dive, keep those questions in mind. What can we learn from this family's experience, and how can we use those lessons in our own lives? We've talked about a lot in this deep dive, right? Legal stuff, the emotional toll of harassment, the bigger picture stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, what can we actually learn from all this?
Yeah.
How can we apply it to our own lives?
I think that's the key part. Right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, the story is about Christmas lights. Right?
But the themes, they're relevant to everyone. I bet you've had disagreements, like with a neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
Or a coworker.
Oh, totally.
Maybe you've seen conflicts online get out of control.
All the time.
It feels like it's harder and harder to find common ground these days.
It really does.
And that's why, for me, the biggest takeaway from this case is...
What is it?
Empathy.
Okay, empathy.
Yeah, recognizing that everyone has their own perspective, their own experiences, their own values, everyone's going through something.
So you're saying even if we disagree with someone, we should try to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them.
Right.
But it's about trying to see things from their side, even just for a minute.
Okay.
So in this case, think about those neighbors. Why were they so bothered by the lights?
Yeah.
Maybe they had a health issue?
Oh, that's true.
That made them sensitive to light or noise? Or maybe something else was going on in their life.
Right.
They were stressed. Who knows?
It's easy to just make assumptions about people.
Oh, totally.
Especially when you're frustrated or you feel like threatened.
It is. And that's why empathy is so important, Oh. It helps you be more open-minded when you're dealing with conflict.
Right.
And helps you remember that everyone's human.
So empathy is the foundation.
Yeah.
But what else can we do, like practically, to handle these kinds of situations better?
Communication, I think.
Okay.
It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how often conflicts happen because people aren't communicating well. Or at all.
Totally.
Like in this case, what if the neighbors had just talked to the family directly, respectfully, just said what was on their mind? Maybe they could have worked something out without calling the cops or going crazy on social media?
That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, talking to each other could have prevented a lot of pain in this situation.
Exactly.
But even when you are communicating, you got to be a good listener too.
Oh, absolutely.
Not just waiting for your turn to talk, but really trying to understand the other person's perspective.
That's it. Active listening. It's super important.
Okay.
Pay attention to their words, sure, but also their body language, how they're saying things, their emotions.
Right.
Put aside your own judgments.
Okay.
Be genuinely curious about what they're saying.
Honestly, that sounds like a lot of work.
It is.
Especially these days when everyone's so distracted.
Yeah.
But I guess it's worth it if it helps.
It is.
Yeah.
It's incredibly rewarding.
Okay.
When you actively listen, you create space for dialogue, compromise, maybe you even find common ground.
Right, right.
And that's where that sense of community comes in.
You've mentioned that a few times, community.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? What does a strong community look like?
It's about understanding that we're all connected. Our actions affect each other.
Right.
And being willing to work together to solve conflicts peacefully and respectfully.
So it's kind of like a shift in how we think.
Right.
Not me versus them.
Exactly.
But like, we're all in this together.
We are.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's about remembering that we all share this responsibility.
Right.
To create a community where everyone feels safe, respected, and heard.
So wrapping up, it's kind of amazing how a fight about Christmas lights turned into these bigger conversations about empathy, communication, and community.
It shows you, right? Even the smallest things can teach us big lessons if we're paying attention.
Totally. So we've learned about empathy, open communication, listening to each other, and building a strong community.
And as we head into the holidays, you know, a time that can be joyful, but also stressful.
Oh, for sure.
I hope you'll remember these lessons.
Yeah.
Try to be more understanding, more patient, have a real desire to connect with the people around you.
Okay.
Even if they see things differently than you do.
Because in the end, it's those connections, those moments where we see each other as human. That's what makes the holidays and life so special.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
Until then, stay curious.